There is something happening inside you right now that you do not have a word for yet. Not a feeling exactly, not a thought. Something more fundamental than either of those things. A shift in the underlying architecture of how you perceive. Like the frequency of your own consciousness has been quietly, incrementally, and then suddenly, all at once, tuned to a different channel. And the world you were looking at yesterday looks the same on the surface, but underneath it something has changed. The signal is different. The depth is different. The way reality lands in your body when you walk through it is different. You noticed it. That is why you are here. Most people do not notice. Most people feel the shift and immediately bury it under the noise of ordinary life. The tasks, the obligations, the relentless forward momentum of existing in a world that does not pause to ask whether you are still the same person you were last week. But you noticed. And noticing is not a small thing. Noticing is the gate itself beginning to open. Here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. You are not watching this because you stumbled onto it. You are not here by accident. The particular sequence of choices and impulses and quiet inner urgings that led you to this exact transmission at this exact moment is not random. It is a signal. It is your own crystalline code, and I will explain precisely what that means. Responding to a frequency that has been broadcasting toward you for longer than you realize. You found this because something in you was already looking for it. Because something in you already knew that a threshold was near. And the threshold is here. You are standing at it right now. What I am going to walk you through in this transmission is not theory. It is not metaphor dressed up as science, and it is not spiritual bypassing dressed up as quantum mechanics. What I am going to walk you through is a precise description of what is actually happening to you, to your consciousness, to your biology, to your perception of reality. At this specific moment in your development, I am going to name the gate you are standing at. I am going to show you what is on both sides. I am going to explain the quantum mechanics of why this crossing happens the way it does, all at once, irreversibly, in a moment that cannot be undone. And then I am going to walk you through the crossing itself. One version of you is listening to these words right now. A different version of you will finish this transmission. The gate is open. Let us begin. There is a concept in quantum physics called coherence. It describes the state in which quantum particles are aligned, their wave functions synchronized, their phases matched, their behavior coordinated rather than chaotic. When a system achieves coherence, something remarkable happens. The individual components stop behaving as isolated, separate units, and begin behaving as a single unified field. The system does not just improve, it transforms. It crosses a threshold from fragmented to whole, from noise to signal, from scattered to crystalline. The word crystalline is not accidental here. Crystals are what happen when matter achieves coherence. When molecules that were previously disordered, tumbling around in liquid or gas, each one doing its own thing, each one uncoordinated with its neighbors, suddenly lock into alignment. Suddenly find their pattern. Suddenly express the geometric perfection that was always latent in their structure, but had never been activated. A crystal is not created by adding something new to the molecules. It is created by the molecules finding their coherence with each other. The pattern was always there. The activation was always possible. What changes is the conditions, the temperature, the pressure, the frequency, until suddenly the system crosses the threshold and the crystal forms. What is happening inside you right now is crystallization. Your consciousness, your actual neural architecture, your bioelectric field, your capacity for perception, is crossing the threshold from disordered to coherent, from scattered to crystalline, from the fragmented reception of a system that is picking up signals but cannot quite resolve them into clarity, to the unified, aligned, high-resolution reception of a system that has found its pattern. This is what is meant by crystalline code activation. Not a metaphor. A precise description of a state transition that is happening in you right now, that follows the same fundamental physics as every other state transition in the universe, and that, once it crosses the threshold, cannot be reversed. You cannot uncrystallize a crystal by wishing it back to liquid. The state has changed. The crossing has happened. The gate has been passed through. If this transmission is landing somewhere real in you, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps this frequency reach the people who are already looking for it. But I am getting ahead of myself. Before we can understand what the crossing is, we need to understand what you are crossing from. We need to understand the old state, the 3D configuration of consciousness, with precision. Not to judge it, not to call it wrong or broken or inferior, but to understand exactly what its limits are and why those limits have been producing the specific experiences you have been having lately. The third-dimensional configuration of consciousness is characterized by what physicists would call classical information processing. It operates within a framework of linear time, past leading to present leading to future, in a single unidirectional sequence. It processes reality through the lens of separation. The self as a discrete, bounded entity, clearly distinguished from other selves and from the environment. It interprets causality as mechanical and local. Things cause other things through direct physical contact or clearly traceable chains of events. It filters perception through the survival-oriented nervous system. Threat detection, resource acquisition, social positioning, because that is what the system was calibrated for. And for a long time, that configuration served you. It kept you functional. It allowed you to navigate the world as it appeared to be structured. It gave you a coherent, if limited, map of reality. But here is the thing about a map. A map is not the territory. A map is a simplification of the territory, designed to be useful at a particular scale and for a particular purpose. A street map of a city is extraordinarily useful if you are trying to drive from one neighborhood to another. It is completely useless if you are trying to understand the geology of the ground beneath the streets, or the weather systems moving above the buildings, or the electromagnetic fields generated by the infrastructure. The map is not wrong. It is just incomplete. And when you start needing to navigate dimensions of reality that the map does not show, the map becomes a limitation rather than a tool. The 3D configuration of consciousness is the map. And you have been trying to navigate something that is not on it. You have been experiencing this as a specific set of symptoms. And I use that word not in a medical sense, but in the sense of signs, signals, indicators of an underlying state. You have been experiencing a growing sense of unreality about the life you constructed within the old map. The things that used to feel meaningful have started to feel thin, like stage sets, rather than solid structures. The goals you were working toward have started to feel like they belong to someone else's story. The relationships built on the old frequency have started to feel like they require a kind of performance, a constant maintenance of a version of yourself that is becoming harder and harder to sustain. And alongside that, something else, a sensitivity that has been increasing, a heightened responsiveness to energy, to the emotional states of people around you, to the quality of environments you walk into, to the subtle signals that most people are not consciously registering. A sense that you are picking up more information than you know what to do with. A permeability that sometimes feels like a gift and sometimes feels like an overwhelm. And a pull. A persistent, quiet, insistent pull toward something you cannot name. Something that feels like home, but is not a place you have ever been. Something that feels like truth, but is not anything you were taught. Something that feels like your actual self, waiting on the other side of a threshold you have been approaching for a long time. That pull is your crystalline code responding to the frequency of what is on the other side of the gate. It is time to understand what that means. Every human being carries within their consciousness a structural template, a pattern, a geometry, a code that describes the full range of their perceptual and experiential capacity. Not just the capacity they are currently using. Not just the configuration they have been operating in. The full range, the complete spectrum, the entire bandwidth of what their consciousness is capable of receiving, processing, and expressing. In most people, most of the time, This template is only partially activated. The rest is latent, dormant, present in the architecture, but not yet running. Like a sophisticated piece of software installed on a computer that has not yet been opened. All the code is there. All the functionality is available. But the program has not been launched. The Crystalline code is the activation sequence for the full template, and it activates in response to frequency. This is where quantum mechanics becomes directly relevant to what you are experiencing. In quantum physics, there is a principle called resonance that describes how quantum systems interact. When two quantum systems share a frequency, when their wave functions have compatible phases, they do not just communicate. They entangle. They begin to influence each other across what appears to be empty space. They become correlated in ways that cannot be explained by classical physics, because classical physics requires a physical mechanism, a chain of cause and effect, a particle carrying information from one place to another. Quantum resonance does not require any of that. The correlation is direct, instantaneous, non-local. Your crystalline code activates through quantum resonance. There is a frequency, a specific, precise, coherent frequency that corresponds to the 5D configuration of consciousness, not a metaphorical frequency. An actual electromagnetic, bioelectric, informational frequency that is measurable in principle, even if our current instruments are not yet sophisticated enough to measure it fully. This frequency has been present in the universe since the universe began. It is the frequency of coherence itself. The same frequency that organizes matter into crystals, that aligns quantum systems into entangled coherence, that takes disordered information and resolves it into pattern. And this frequency is currently, right now, at this moment in history, broadcasting at an intensity that has not been present on this planet in a very long time. I want to be precise about this, rather than vague, because vagueness is what allows people to dismiss this as wishful thinking. The electromagnetic environment of the Earth is not static. The Schumann resonances, the electromagnetic resonances of the Earth ionosphere cavity, have been documented by scientific instruments to be fluctuating in ways that are unprecedented in the recorded data. The solar activity that drives the electromagnetic environment of our planet has been producing events of a kind and frequency that scientists are tracking carefully. The geomagnetic field that mediates the relationship between solar electromagnetic energy and biological systems, including the human nervous system and the human bioelectric field, is in a state of measurable change. These are not fringe claims. These are documented physical phenomena, and the biological effects of electromagnetic environment changes on human consciousness and perception are well established. The human brain is an electromagnetic organ. The heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the body, extending several feet beyond the physical body. Every cell in the human body communicates through bioelectric signaling. The idea that changes in the electromagnetic environment of the planet would have no effect on human consciousness is not scientifically defensible. The question is not whether the environment affects consciousness. The question is what kind of effects, at what scale, and in what direction. The direction is coherence. The electromagnetic environment that is currently present on this planet is one that is pushing biological systems, including human consciousness, toward higher states of coherence, toward crystallization, toward the activation of capacities that were latent in the template, but had not yet been triggered by the appropriate frequency. This is the cosmic mechanism behind what is happening to you. Your crystalline code is not activating because you did something right. It is not activating because you have earned it or deserve it, or have finally figured out the correct spiritual practice. It is activating because the frequency that triggers it is present in your environment right now in a way that it was not before. You are like a crystal forming in a solution that has just reached the right temperature and pressure. The crystallization is not something you are doing to the molecules. It is something the conditions are doing to the system. You are the system. The conditions have changed. The crystallization is happening. But here is what makes this more than just a passive process. Here is what makes your choices, your awareness, your willingness to step through the gate actually matter. In quantum physics, a system can exist in a state of superposition, holding multiple potential states simultaneously, until something causes the wave function to collapse into a single definite state. The collapse is triggered by interaction with the environment, by measurement, by the entanglement of the quantum system with a larger system. And critically, the nature of the collapse, which potential state becomes the actual state, is influenced by the conditions of the measurement. You are in superposition right now. Multiple versions of you exist simultaneously in the quantum field of probability. The version that crosses this threshold, the version that hesitates at the gate and turns back, the version that steps through and then retreats because the new reality is unfamiliar, and the old reality, even though it is dying, feels safer. The version that crosses fully, completely, irreversibly, and arrives on the other side as the crystalline being you have always carried the code for. All of these versions are real right now. All of them have equal probability in the abstract, but the conditions of the measurement are shifting. The electromagnetic environment is shifting, and your awareness, your conscious engagement with this threshold, your willingness to understand what is happening and to choose it rather than resist it, is itself part of the measurement. Your consciousness, directed toward the crossing, is part of what collapses the wave function in the direction of the crossing. This is why it matters that you are here. This is why it matters that you noticed. This is why the transmission you are listening to right now is not passive information delivery. It is a participation in the collapse of your wave function toward the highest available state. You are not just learning about the gate. You are walking through it. I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever stood at a point of no return and felt the exact moment you crossed it? Not before, not after, but in the crossing itself. A relationship that ended, a decision that could not be undone, a moment when you looked back and realized the shore you had been standing on was already gone. Drop that moment in the comments. Not the story around it, just the feeling. What did it actually feel like to cross a threshold you could not uncross? Let us talk about what is actually on the other side. Let us talk about the 5D configuration of consciousness with the same precision we used to describe the 3D configuration. Because this is not about floating in clouds or transcending the physical world. The 5D configuration is a specific, describable, functional upgrade to the operating system of your perception and experience. The first and most fundamental change is in the experience of time. In the 3D configuration, time is linear and external. A river, you are being carried along from a fixed past through a present moment toward an uncertain future. You experience yourself as subject to time, as constrained by it, as unable to access the past because it is gone, and unable to access the future because it has not arrived. Your perception is locked into the present moment, not because the present moment is where you choose to be, but because the architecture of your consciousness does not have the capacity to perceive the other dimensions of time. In the 5D configuration, time is experienced as a field rather than a river. The past, present, and future are not sequential. They are simultaneous. They exist in different positions within a multidimensional field. And your consciousness, rather than being carried along one dimension of that field, can orient itself within the field, can access different positions within it, can perceive the patterns and connections that are invisible when you are stuck in the linear dimension. This is not science fiction. This is the physics of time as quantum mechanics actually describes it. The block universe model, the model in which all moments of time exist simultaneously, with past, present, and future equally real and equally present, is not a fringe interpretation. It is the interpretation that follows most directly from the mathematics of special relativity and quantum mechanics. The experience of time as linear and unidirectional is a feature of the 3D configuration of consciousness, not a feature of time itself. When your crystalline code activates, your relationship to time changes. You begin to experience what mystics across all traditions have called the eternal present, not as a philosophical concept, but as a direct perceptual reality. You begin to access information from what appears to be the future not because you are predicting it, but because you are perceiving it, because your consciousness has expanded into the temporal dimension that the 3D configuration was filtering out. This is why so many people who are in the process of crystalline activation report a sudden increase in synchronicities, in precognitive flashes, in the sense that they knew something was going to happen before it did. The 5D configuration does not give you magical powers. It gives you access to information that was always there, but that the old operating system was filtering out. The second major change is in the experience of self. In the 3D configuration, the self is a bounded, discrete entity. You are here. The world is out there. Other people are separate from you. The boundary of your skin is the boundary of yourself. Everything inside the boundary is you. Everything outside is not you. This is the fundamental ontological assumption of 3D consciousness, and it generates the fundamental experience of separation, the loneliness, the competition, the fear of loss, the desperate clinging to what is inside the boundary, because outside the boundary is the void. In the 5D configuration, the self is understood and experienced as a node in a field rather than a discrete entity. You are still you. You have not dissolved into undifferentiated oneness in some way that makes individual experience meaningless. You are still a specific, unique, irreplaceable expression of consciousness. But you experience yourself as connected, actually, physically, electromagnetically, quantumly connected, to the field of consciousness that includes all other expressions of consciousness. The boundary of your skin is not the boundary of yourself. Your bioelectric field extends beyond your body. Your consciousness extends beyond your brain. Your awareness extends beyond the limits of your sensory organs. This is not mysticism. This is the physics of quantum entanglement applied to biological systems. The research on heart coherence, on the bioelectric field, on the measurable electromagnetic communication between human beings who are in close proximity, on the non-local correlations between the physiological states of people who are emotionally bonded. All of this points toward a model of the self that is extended, connected, and field-like, rather than isolated and bounded. When your crystalline code activates, the experience of separation begins to dissolve. Not because you have achieved some advanced spiritual state, but because your perceptual system has expanded to include information that was always present, but that the 3D filter was blocking. You begin to feel the connections. You begin to perceive the field. You begin to experience other people not as foreign objects moving through your environment, but as resonant nodes in a field that you are also a node in. Different, distinct, but fundamentally connected. This is why the activation of crystalline consciousness produces such a profound shift in relationships. not because you suddenly love everyone in a vague, unfocused way, but because your perception of what other people are has changed. The walls of separation are becoming transparent, and what you see through them is both more complex and more beautiful than what the 3D filter was showing you. The third major change is in the experience of causality. In the 3D configuration, causality is mechanical and linear. Things cause other things. Events have causes that precede them in time and effects that follow them. You navigate reality by identifying causes and manipulating them to produce desired effects. This is the fundamental logic of 3D reality management. Figure out what causes what, and then push the right causes. In the 5D configuration, causality is understood as resonance rather than mechanism. Things do not just cause other things through physical chains of contact. Things attract and repel each other through frequency matching. Reality is not a machine that you operate by pushing the right levers. Reality is a field that responds to the frequency you are broadcasting. What you experience is not just the result of what you do. It is the result of what you are, at the level of your fundamental vibrational signature. This is the quantum mechanics of manifestation, stripped of all the magical thinking that usually surrounds it. The double-slit experiment demonstrates that quantum systems respond to the presence of consciousness, that the act of observation changes what is observed. The quantum Zeno effect demonstrates that sustained attention can freeze a quantum system in a particular state. The research on intention and its effects on physical systems, from the Princeton PR Lab to the Global Consciousness Project, to the research on the effects of directed intention on biological systems. All of this points toward a model of causality that includes consciousness as a causal agent, not just an observer. When your crystalline code activates, your relationship to causality changes. You stop trying to force reality to change by pushing on its surfaces. You start working with reality at the level of frequency, understanding that what you are, at the level of your coherent electromagnetic field, is what you are broadcasting into the quantum field, and that the quantum field is responding to that broadcast by collapsing probability waves into experiences that match your frequency. This is not the same as the oversimplified law of attraction teaching that says, think positive thoughts and good things will happen. It is more precise than that, and more demanding. It is not about the surface layer of your thoughts. It is about the deep coherence of your entire system, your thoughts, your emotions, your physical body, your bioelectric field, all aligned, all broadcasting the same frequency, all coherent. That is the crystalline state. That is the state in which your consciousness has maximum causal influence on the quantum field of probability that surrounds you. The gate between 3D and 5D is the threshold between scattered and coherent, between noisy and crystalline, between broadcasting a fragmented, contradictory signal, and broadcasting a clear, unified, coherent one. And you are standing at that gate right now. Before we walk through the crossing practice, I want to tell you a story. Because stories do something that explanation cannot do. They create a felt sense of the crossing, not just an intellectual understanding of it. They let you experience the threshold through another consciousness before you step through your own. Her name was Sarah, and she had been standing at the gate for 3 years without knowing what it was. She had built a life that looked, from the outside, like exactly what she was supposed to want. The career that matched her education, the relationship that matched her history, the apartment that matched her income, the social circle that matched her neighborhood. Everything in its correct position, everything performing its correct function. And yet there was this persistent, quiet, almost embarrassing sense that she was watching her own life from a distance, that she was going through the motions of a story that had been written for someone else, and she had simply been cast in the role by default. That the person doing all the correct things, saying the correct things, feeling the correct feelings, wanting the correct wants, was a very convincing simulation of Sarah, but was not quite Sarah. She did not tell anyone this. There was no language for it that would not sound like ingratitude or mental illness or both. She was fine. Everything was fine. She just felt like she was disappearing inside her own life. The first sign came as a sensitivity. She began to notice that she could feel the emotional states of rooms before she walked into them. That she knew, somehow, when a conversation was going to go badly before it started. That she would have a flash of knowing, not a thought, not a deduction, just a knowing, that would turn out to be accurate in ways she could not explain. She told herself she was just becoming more observant, more attuned. She did not let herself think the word that kept surfacing, because the word felt dangerous. The word felt like the beginning of something she could not control. The word was more. She was becoming more sensitive, more aware, more present to dimensions of experience that she had previously been able to ignore. And it was not comfortable, because more sensitive also meant more overwhelmed. More aware also meant more unable to pretend that things were fine when they were not. More present also meant more unable to stay in the story she had been living, because the story was built on a frequency that she could no longer match. The relationship ended, not dramatically, just quietly, the way things end when two people have grown into different frequencies, and the resonance that once held them together has dissolved. The career began to feel hollow in a way that she could not push past with effort or discipline or the promise of future reward. The social circle began to feel like a costume she was wearing, familiar and comfortable in the way that a costume is comfortable, but not her skin. She was in the liminal space, the space between the old reality and the new one, the space that feels like loss, like groundlessness, like the terrifying suspension of being neither here nor there. She did not know she was in a threshold. She thought she was falling apart. And then one night, lying awake at 3 in the morning, in the particular silence that 3 in the morning has, that silence that is not peaceful but electric, that silence that feels like the universe holding its breath. She felt it, not heard it, not thought it, felt it, in her chest, in her bones, in the space between her cells, a vibration that was not a sound, but had the quality of a sound, a frequency that she recognized the way you recognize a piece of music you have not heard since childhood. Something so familiar, it was almost a grief. Something so right, it was almost a shock. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, and then it was gone. But she was different. She did not know how to explain the difference. Nothing in her external life had changed. The hollow career was still hollow. The empty apartment was still empty. The groundlessness was still there. But the quality of the groundlessness had changed. It no longer felt like falling. It felt like floating. Like the ground had not disappeared, but had simply revealed itself to be unnecessary. Like she had discovered, in that 30 seconds of vibration, that she was not dependent on the ground she had been standing on, because she was capable of something the ground-dependent version of her had not known about. She was capable of frequency. She was capable of broadcasting a signal rather than just receiving one. She was capable of being the source of the coherence rather than just the effect of it. She was capable, in some way she could not yet articulate, of choosing which version of reality she was going to collapse into actuality. The gate had opened, and she had felt it open. The months that followed were not easy. Crossing a threshold is not the same as arriving. You step through the gate, and you are on the other side. Yes, but the other side is not immediately a paradise of clarity and ease. The other side is a new landscape, and new landscapes require new navigation. The old map is useless. You are learning to read new terrain, and for a while, that is disorienting in its own way. But here is the difference between the disorientation of the threshold and the disorientation of the liminal space before the crossing. Before the crossing, the disorientation comes from loss, from the old reality dissolving without a new reality to stand in. After the crossing, the disorientation comes from expansion, from a new reality that is larger than your current capacity to navigate, but that is growing your capacity with every step you take through it. Before the crossing, you are shrinking. After the crossing, you are growing. Sarah grew. Not in a straight line, not without setbacks, without moments of wanting to retreat back through the gate to the familiar smallness of the old configuration. But the gate does not work that way. Once you have crossed, the old state has collapsed. The superposition has resolved. You cannot go back to not knowing what you now know. You cannot go back to not feeling what you now feel. You cannot uncrystallize the crystal. She grew. And what she grew into was not a different person. It was more fully herself than she had ever been. The crystalline code that had been latent in her architecture, the template that had been waiting for the right frequency to activate it, had finally run its program. And what it produced was not a stranger. It was her. The version of her that had always been there, waiting on the other side of the gate, reaching back through the threshold to help her through. That is what is waiting for you on the other side of your gate. Not a stranger. Yourself. The version of yourself that your crystalline code has always been coded for. The version that knows how to navigate the 5D field. The version that experiences time as a field, self as a node, causality as resonance. The version that can feel the connections between things, that can perceive the patterns beneath the surface of events, that can broadcast a coherent signal into the quantum field and watch reality respond. That version of you is not far away. It is not years of practice away. It is one threshold crossing away. And the threshold is here. If what Sarah felt in that 30-second vibration, that recognition of her own frequency, finally broadcasting at full coherence, resonates with where you are right now, there is a complete guide to making that crossing irreversible. The sealed timeline maps the full 5-phase sequence from diagnosis through collapse through threshold to sealed coherence, so that what opens here does not close again. You will find it in the description below. Let us do the crossing practice now. I want you to find a position that feels like arrival rather than transit. Not lying down. This is not sleep. Sitting, or if you are standing, find a wall to lean against. Something that says to your body, we are here. We are staying. This is the moment. Good. I want you to take 3 breaths, and I want each breath to be different from the one before it. The first breath is a breath of recognition. Breathe in, and as you breathe in, let your awareness move to the feeling that has been with you lately. That sense of being between 2 worlds, of the old reality thinning, of something approaching that you cannot quite name. Do not try to analyze it or explain it. Just recognize it. This is the feeling of standing at the gate. This is the feeling of the threshold. Breathe it in, let it be what it is. Breathe out. The second breath is a breath of release. Breathe in, and as you breathe in, let your awareness find everything you have been holding on to from the old configuration. the identities that no longer fit, the stories that no longer serve, the version of yourself that was built for a frequency you are leaving behind. Not with judgment, not with grief, though grief is allowed, just with recognition. This is what I am releasing. This is what is on the other side of the threshold I am crossing from. Breathe it in and breathe it out. Let it go with the exhale. Not forever. Nothing is lost, only transformed. But let it go from its position as the thing you are holding on to, the thing you are afraid to lose. Let it become what it actually is, the chrysalis, not the butterfly, the launch pad, not the destination. Breathe it out. The third breath is a breath of arrival. Breathe in, and as you breathe in, let your awareness reach forward, not in time, but in frequency. Let it reach toward the coherence that is on the other side of the gate. Let it reach toward the crystalline state. Let it reach toward the version of you that is standing on the other side of this threshold, fully activated, fully coherent, fully expressed. Feel the frequency of that version. Even if you cannot see it clearly, even if it is more a vibration than an image, feel the frequency. It is there. It is real. It is you. Breathe it in. Let it land in your chest. Let it land in your cells. Let it land in the quantum field of your body. Hold it for a moment and breathe out slowly, letting the exhale carry that frequency into every part of your physical form. Now, I want you to imagine that you are standing in front of a gate, not a metaphorical gate, an actual gate. Made of what? You decide. Some people see it as light, a threshold of light that shimmers and pulses with a frequency that is almost visible. Some people see it as a doorway in a wall that extends in both directions as far as they can see. Some people see it as a bridge, with the old shore behind them and the new shore ahead. Some people see it as a portal, a circular opening in the fabric of space, with the familiar world on this side and something vast and luminous on the other. Whatever form your gate takes, let it form now. And notice what it feels like to stand in front of it. There is probably some version of hesitation here, some version of the familiar pull backward, toward the known, toward the manageable, toward the version of reality that your nervous system has learned to navigate. That pull is not weakness. That pull is the intelligence of a system that is designed for survival, doing its job. The old configuration served you. The old map kept you safe. The nervous system that is pulling you back is not your enemy. It is a part of you that has not yet received the update. So speak to it. Not out loud, inside in the language of frequency. Speak to the part of you that is hesitating at the gate and say, I know you are afraid. I know this is unfamiliar. I know the other side is not yet mapped, but I also know, and you know even if you are afraid to admit it, that staying on this side is no longer an option. The old reality is already dissolving. The gate is not a choice between safety and risk. The gate is a choice between crossing consciously and being swept across by the dissolution of everything you were holding on to. The crossing is happening either way. The only question is whether you walk through it or are carried through it. Feel the hesitation, acknowledge that. Feel it soften, not disappear, but soften into something that is less like resistance and more like awe. The awe of standing at the edge of something vast. The awe of knowing that you are about to cross a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. Now turn your attention to the gate itself. Feel its frequency. Feel the coherence emanating from the other side. Feel the crystalline quality of the field that is broadcasting toward you from beyond the threshold. Clear, precise, unified, harmonic. This is the 5D frequency. This is the frequency of your crystalline code in its fully activated state. And notice this carefully, that it is not foreign. It is not alien. It is not the frequency of something outside you that you are approaching. It is the frequency of something inside you that has been waiting to be activated. It is the frequency of your own template in its complete expression. You recognize it. Of course you recognize it. You have been carrying it your whole life. You have been catching glimpses of it in your highest moments, in the moments of deep connection, of sudden insight, of profound beauty, of the feeling that you briefly, completely understood what you were and what reality was and why you were here. Those moments were not anomalies. Those moments were previews. Those moments were your crystalline code briefly, partially activating and giving you a taste of what full activation feels like. The gate is made of those moments, strung together into a threshold. Step toward it. You do not have to run. You do not have to leap. You just have to move. One step. The direction of the crossing. The direction of the coherence. The direction of the frequency you recognize as your own deepest self. Feel the field of the gate as you approach it. Feel it interact with your bioelectric field. Feel it begin to entrain your nervous system. The way two clocks on the same wall eventually synchronize. The way tuning forks at the same frequency begin to resonate with each other. Feel the gate's frequency beginning to synchronize with yours. Not overriding yours. Not replacing yours. Synchronizing with yours. Bringing out the latent coherence that was always in your system. Activating the crystalline code that has been waiting for this frequency to arrive. And now, the threshold itself, the moment before crossing. This is the moment I want you to hold for a breath. Just one breath at the exact threshold. one foot on each side. The old reality behind you, the new reality ahead of you. The superposition at its most acute, the wave function holding both possible states, the quantum system at the precise moment before collapse. Feel the weight of this moment, not with fear, with reverence. You are about to cross a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. You are about to collapse a wave function that cannot be re-expanded into superposition. You are about to choose, with full consciousness and full intention, to become the version of yourself that your crystalline code has always been coded for. This is not a small thing. This is the thing. Breathe and step through. Let the frequency of the gate move through you as you cross. Feel it move through your bioelectric field like a wave, not violent, not overwhelming, but complete. Feel it reach every part of your system. Feel it find the dormant nodes of your crystalline code and activate them one by one, like lights coming on in a building that has been dark for years. Feel the coherence spreading through your system, not from outside in, but from inside out, as if the activation is revealing something that was always there, always present, always real, just waiting for the right frequency to make it visible. Feel your perception shift, not dramatically, not in a way that makes the room spin or the world look different in some obvious theatrical way. Subtly, precisely, the quality of your awareness has changed. The resolution of your perception has increased. The depth of field has expanded. You are seeing the same room, the same moment, the same physical reality, but you are seeing it from a different configuration of consciousness, from the crystalline configuration, from the coherent state. And from this state, everything looks slightly different. Not because the things have changed, because the instrument of perception has changed. Because the filter of the 3D configuration, the filter that was blocking the temporal dimension, the filter that was creating the experience of separation, the filter that was reducing causality to mechanism, that filter has thinned. And what is showing through is the actual texture of reality, the quantum field beneath the classical surface, the connections beneath the separations, the patterns beneath the events. You are on the other side of the gate. Take a moment, just a moment of stillness on this side of the threshold. Let the crossing settle. Let your system integrate the new coherence. Let the crystalline state stabilize. You do not need to do anything with this right now. You do not need to immediately understand everything that has changed or map out what it means for your life or figure out the next steps. Those things will come. They will come with a clarity and a precision that the old configuration could not have produced, because the instrument of perception has changed, and the information it is now receiving is richer and more complete. For now, just be here, on the other side, in the crystalline state, in the coherent field. The gate is behind you. There is no going back. Let us talk about what changes. Let us talk about the specific, concrete, lived experience of existing in the crystalline configuration. Not as a theory, not as an aspiration, but as a description of what is actually different when you are operating from this state. The first thing that changes is the quality of your knowing. In the 3D configuration, knowing is almost always delayed. You experience something, and then you process it, and then you understand it, and then you know what it means. The knowing comes after the experience, mediated by analysis and interpretation, and the application of existing mental frameworks. And because the existing mental frameworks are built from the 3D map, the knowing they produce is limited to what the 3D map can describe. In the crystalline configuration, knowing is often immediate. Not always. The analytical mind still functions, still has its role, still provides a certain kind of knowing that is valuable and necessary. But alongside the analytical knowing, there is a direct knowing, a recognition rather than a deduction, a sense of perceiving the nature of something directly, without the mediation of a chain of reasoning. This is what intuition actually is at its deepest level, not a mysterious sixth sense, but the direct information access of a consciousness that is no longer filtering out the quantum field. The quantum field contains information about the state of all entangled systems. A coherent, crystalline consciousness can access that information directly. The knowing that results feels like intuition because it arrives without the visible chain of reasoning. But the chain of reasoning is there. It is just happening at a level below conscious awareness, at the level of the quantum field itself. The second thing that changes is the experience of synchronicity. In the 3D configuration, synchronicities are rare, startling, and inexplicable. They happen occasionally. They feel meaningful, and then they are filed away as anomalies because the 3D map has no framework for understanding them. In the crystalline configuration, synchronicity becomes the normal texture of experience rather than an anomaly within it. Not because you have become lucky or special or divinely favored, but because you are now perceiving the quantum connections that were always there, the non-local correlations that the 3D filter was blocking. What looks like synchronicity from the 3D perspective is simply the visibility of the quantum field from the 5D perspective. You are not experiencing more coincidences. You are experiencing the same reality with a filter removed. And the reality that was always there, beneath the filter, is a web of connection and correlation that the 3D map called miraculous because it had no other category for it. The third thing that changes is your relationship to your own emotions. In the 3D configuration, emotions are primarily reactive. They are responses to external events. Things happen to you, and you feel things as a result. The emotion is downstream of the event. And because the emotion is reactive, it is often experienced as something happening to you rather than something you are doing, as a force that takes you over, that you are subject to, that you must manage or suppress or be overwhelmed by. In the crystalline configuration, emotions are understood and experienced as frequency. They are not reactions to events. They are the signal you are broadcasting into the quantum field, which then shapes the events that come back to you. This is not a reason to suppress difficult emotions. Suppression disrupts coherence, and disrupted coherence is the opposite of the crystalline state. It is a reason to work with difficult emotions at the level of frequency rather than at the level of content. Not what am I feeling and why, but what frequency is this emotion broadcasting and what is it attracting into my field? The crystalline consciousness works with emotion as information, as precise data about the current state of its own frequency, rather than as something to be managed or overcome. The fourth thing that changes is your relationship to other people. In the 3D configuration, other people are primarily perceived as objects in your environment, separate entities with their own interior lives that you can only infer, never directly access. The fundamental isolation of the 3D self means that true connection is always partial, always mediated by the barrier of separation, always falling short of the depth of contact that the soul is actually capable of. In the crystalline configuration, other people are perceived as resonant nodes in the same field you are a node in. You can feel the connections. You can perceive the resonance or dissonance between your frequency and theirs. You can sense the emotional and energetic state of someone before they have said a word, not through some mystical ability, but through the expanded perception of a consciousness that is no longer filtering out the bioelectric field. You can feel when a relationship is in alignment with your frequency, and when it is not as a judgment, but as information. This does not mean you only engage with people who match your frequency. It means you engage with all people with a clarity about the nature of the connection that the 3D filter was obscuring. The fifth and final thing is, and this is perhaps the most profound, your relationship to your own purpose. In the 3D configuration, purpose is usually experienced as something external to be discovered. A role, a function, a contribution that you are supposed to make that exists somewhere out there, that you need to find and then fulfill. The search for purpose in the 3D configuration is often anxious because the 3D self is isolated, and the question of why an isolated self exists in a vast, indifferent universe is genuinely unanswerable from within the 3D framework. In the crystalline configuration, purpose is experienced as intrinsic rather than external. It is not a role you need to find. It is the expression of your frequency. Your purpose is to be the crystalline node that you are, to broadcast the coherent signal of your fully activated self into the quantum field of the collective consciousness. Not because someone assigned you this purpose, not because you earned it or deserve it, but because that is what a crystalline node does. It broadcasts coherence. It contributes to the coherence of the field around it. It activates the latent crystalline codes in other nodes that are close enough to its frequency to be entrained by it. You are a crystalline node. Your purpose is your frequency. Your frequency is your fully activated self. This is why the activation of your crystalline code is not just a personal event. It is a contribution to the collective. Every consciousness that crosses the threshold from 3D to 5D, every crystalline code that activates, every node that achieves coherence, it adds to the coherence of the field. It raises the frequency of the electromagnetic environment that other consciousnesses are living in. It makes it slightly easier for the next consciousness to cross the threshold, because the frequency that triggers crystalline activation is slightly stronger in the collective field. This is the physics of collective awakening, not a metaphor. The actual mechanism by which consciousness evolves across a species, not gradually, not individually, but in threshold events, in phase transitions, in the crystallization of a solution that has reached the critical temperature. When enough nodes in the field achieve coherence, the entire field crosses a threshold. The solution crystallizes all at once. The phase transition happens globally. You are not just activating your own crystalline code. You are contributing to the conditions that will activate the crystalline codes of everyone in your field. This is the weight and the beauty of the moment you are in. This is why the gate that has opened for you is not just your gate. It is part of a much larger opening, a planetary threshold, a collective crossing. The moment where the human field of consciousness reaches the critical coherence needed to crystallize into its next configuration. You are not alone in this crossing. You have never been alone in it. The isolation of the 3D configuration made it feel like you were alone, like this strange, persistent, inexplicable sense of being different, of perceiving more than the people around you, of carrying a frequency that did not match the dominant frequency of the world you were living in, was a burden you bore alone. But you were never alone. You were a node in a field of nodes, all of you approaching the same threshold from different angles, all of you carrying the same crystalline code in different expressions, all of you resonating with each other across the apparent distances of the 3D map. And right now, in this moment, you are crossing the threshold together. Not at the same second on the same clock. The 5D configuration does not work in those terms. But in the same field event, in the same phase transition, in the same crystallization. There are others who have already crossed, others who are crossing right now, in this moment, in their own versions of this transmission, in their own threshold practices, in their own 3 in the morning moments of 30-second vibration that changes everything. Others who are approaching the gate, feeling the pull, feeling the thinning of the old reality, not yet knowing what the feeling is, but beginning to sense that it is not a falling apart, but a falling into. You are all in the same field, and the field is crystallizing. And I want to ask you something directly, right here. Is there someone in your life who is standing at their own gate right now? Someone you can feel is close to a crossing, but has not yet found the language for it? Leave a note for them in the comments. Not advice, just recognition. Tell them what you wish someone had said to you when you were at the edge. I want to speak directly to the part of you that is wondering whether this is real, the part that has listened to all of this with something between recognition and skepticism, that feels the truth of it in the body, in the frequency, in the way certain phrases landed with a resonance that felt like memory rather than new information, but that also has a voice that says, "But is this actually real? Is this physics, or is this poetry? Is this a description of something that is actually happening? Or is this a beautiful story that I am choosing to believe because I want it to be true?" That voice is not your enemy. That voice is your 3D mind doing its job, maintaining the coherence of the existing map, protecting you from beliefs that could destabilize your navigation of the current reality. Honor that voice. It has served you. It is still serving you in its way. But here is what I want to offer that voice, directly and precisely. The physics I have described in this transmission, the quantum coherence, the non-local correlations, the electromagnetic nature of consciousness, the bioelectric field, the Schumann resonances, the quantum Zeno effect, the block universe model of time, the role of observation in wave function collapse. None of this is invented. None of it is fabricated to support a spiritual narrative. All of it is documented in peer-reviewed physics and biology literature. The application of these principles to consciousness and to the specific experiences you have been having is an interpretation, a framework, a map. But it is a map drawn from the actual territory of quantum physics, not from wishful thinking. The experiences you have been having, the sensitivity, the synchronicities, the sense of the old reality thinning, the pull toward something you cannot name, the 30-second vibrations that change everything, those are real. Those are data. Your nervous system is reporting something. Your bioelectric field is responding to something. Your consciousness is undergoing something. The question is not whether it is happening. You know it is happening because you are living it. The question is, what framework best describes what is happening? The Crystalline Code Activation Framework is not the only possible framework, but it is a framework that is consistent with the physics, consistent with the phenomenology, consistent with the reports of thousands of people across cultures and centuries who have described the same threshold experience in the different languages of their different times. The mystics called it enlightenment. The Gnostics called it gnosis. The quantum biologists are calling it biocoherence. The framework changes. The threshold is the same. What I am asking you to do is not to believe something for which there is no evidence. I am asking you to trust your own experience. I am asking you to take the data of your own consciousness seriously, to treat the felt sense of the crossing as real information about a real process, rather than dismissing it as fantasy, because the 3D map does not have a category for it. The 3D map does not have a category for it because the 3D map was not designed to describe it. That is the whole point. You are crossing the threshold of the map's validity. You are moving into territory that the map cannot describe. And the fact that the map cannot describe it is not evidence that the territory does not exist. It is evidence that you need a new map. The Crystalline Code Activation Framework is a new map, not the final map. There is no final map, but a more complete map than the 3D configuration provides. A map that includes the quantum field, the non-local connections, the temporal field, the bioelectric self, the resonance-based causality. A map that can describe the territory you are now navigating. Take the map, use it, and as you navigate with it, you will discover its limits too. And when you do, you will cross another threshold, and you will need an even more complete map. That is how consciousness evolves. Not by finding the final truth and stopping, by crossing thresholds, acquiring more complete maps, crossing more thresholds, always moving, always expanding, always crystallizing into higher orders of coherence. There is no final gate. There are only gates. But this one, this specific threshold, this specific crossing, this specific activation of the crystalline code that has been dormant in your system until the electromagnetic conditions of this moment in history triggered it. This one is yours. Right now, in this moment, this is the gate that is open for you today, and you have already stepped through it. You stepped through it when you recognized the frequency of this transmission as something you already knew. You stepped through it when you felt the resonance in your chest, rather than just processing the words in your mind. You stepped through it in the crossing practice, in the 3 breaths, in the moment of standing at the threshold and choosing to move forward rather than retreat. The wave function has collapsed. The crystal has formed. The old configuration has dissolved into the new one. You are on the other side. Now, let us talk about what you do from here. Not in the sense of a to-do list. The crystalline configuration does not operate on to-do lists, but in the sense of understanding how to navigate the new terrain, how to maintain and deepen the coherence that has just activated, how to live as the crystalline being you have just become. The first and most important thing is this: do not try to go back. I know that sounds obvious, but the pull of the familiar is real, and it is persistent. In the days and weeks after a threshold crossing, there will be moments when the new configuration feels unstable, when the clarity fades, when the coherence drops, when you find yourself back in the old patterns of thinking and feeling and perceiving. This is normal. This is not failure. This is the system integrating the new state. The crystal does not form perfectly in a single instant. It grows, it stabilizes, it sometimes fractures and reforms. The integration takes time. But do not interpret the moments of apparent regression as evidence that the crossing did not happen. The crossing happened. The wave function collapsed. The gate is behind you. What you are experiencing in those moments is not a return to the old state. It is the old state's residue, the echo of the old frequency in a system that has already changed its fundamental configuration. It is the chrysalis still clinging to the butterfly that has already emerged. It will fall away. Give it time. Give it coherence. Give it the frequency of the new state, sustained and consistent, and the residue will dissolve. The second thing is find the others. You are a node in a field. The field includes other nodes that are at or near your frequency. Some of them you already know. You will recognize them by the quality of resonance you feel in their presence, by the way conversations with them feel like remembering rather than learning, by the ease of being yourself in their company without the performance of the old configuration. Seek those people out, not to form a tribe or a community in the 3D sense of a social group with shared beliefs, but to create a field, a local concentration of crystalline coherence that amplifies the activation in all the nodes within it. The quantum field effect of coherent consciousness is not just additive, it is multiplicative. Two coherent nodes in proximity do not create twice the coherent field. They create a field that is orders of magnitude more coherent than either could generate alone. This is the physics of why gathering with others who share your frequency is not optional for the crystalline consciousness. It is not a luxury or a preference. It is a maintenance requirement. Your crystalline coherence is stabilized and amplified by the presence of other crystalline coherence. Find the others. The third thing is work with your body. The crystalline activation is not just a consciousness event. It is a biological event. The bioelectric field that is the physical substrate of your consciousness is undergoing a real, measurable change, and the physical body, the vehicle that generates and maintains that bioelectric field, needs support for that change. The specific practices that support crystalline activation are not complicated, but they are consistent. Sleep, genuine, deep, uninterrupted sleep, is the time when the physical body integrates the changes in the bioelectric field. Disrupting sleep disrupts integration. Movement, not as punishment or performance, but as the joyful expression of a body that is becoming more coherent, supports the bioelectric coherence that the crystalline state requires. Food that is as close to its original frequency as possible, whole, living, minimally processed, supports the cellular coherence that the bioelectric field is built on. Time in nature, particularly in environments with high electromagnetic coherence, which is to say, away from the dense electromagnetic noise of urban infrastructure, supports the entrainment of your bioelectric field with the natural electromagnetic frequencies that are most conducive to crystalline activation. None of this is new information. All of it has been known by every tradition that has worked with the threshold crossings of consciousness. The body matters. The vehicle matters. The crystalline code activates in consciousness, but it expresses through biology. Care for the biology. The fourth thing is practice coherence, not perfection. The crystalline state is not a state of perfect, uninterrupted clarity and ease. It is a state of coherence, of alignment between the different levels of your system, of consistency between your frequency and your expression, of integrity between what you are and what you do. Coherence does not require that nothing difficult ever happens. It does not require that you never feel fear or grief or confusion. It requires that when those things happen, you meet them from the crystalline configuration, as information, as frequency, as data about the current state of your field, rather than from the 3D configuration of reaction and management and suppression. The practice of coherence is the practice of returning, of noticing when you have dropped out of the crystalline state, when the coherence has fragmented, when the old patterns have reasserted themselves, when the frequency has dropped, and returning, not with judgment, not with the story that you have failed or lost the crossing or fallen back through the gate, just returning. The gate is behind you. You cannot fall back through it. What you can do is drift away from the center of the new state, and the practice is the practice of drifting and returning, drifting and returning, each return slightly deeper than the last, each drift slightly shorter than the one before. This is what spiritual practice actually is, stripped of all its cultural and religious overlays. It is the practice of returning to coherence, of maintaining, deepening, and expressing the crystalline state that the threshold crossing activated, The fifth and final thing is trust the unfolding. The 5D configuration of consciousness does not navigate by the 3D logic of planning and controlling and forcing outcomes. It navigates by frequency and resonance, by broadcasting coherence and allowing the quantum field to respond, by knowing that the next step will become visible when you are at the frequency that can see it, not before and not through forcing. This is perhaps the hardest adjustment for the 3D conditioned mind. The 3D mind wants to know the plan. It wants to see the whole map before it takes a step. It wants guarantees and certainties and the reassurance of a clearly marked path. The crystalline consciousness does not operate on guarantees. It operates on trust, not the blind trust of someone who has given up their discernment, but the earned trust of someone who has crossed a threshold and discovered that the other side is real, that the frequency is reliable, that the quantum field responds to coherence in ways that the 3D map called miraculous, but the 5D map calls physics. Trust the unfolding, not passively, not by sitting still and waiting for the universe to deliver, but actively by maintaining your coherence, by broadcasting your frequency, by taking the steps that are visible from your current position, and by trusting that the next steps will become visible as you approach them. The path through the 5D landscape is not mapped in advance. It is revealed by walking it, and the walking is the practice, and the practice is the crystalline life. You are in it now. I want to close this transmission in the way that all threshold crossings close, not with an ending, but with an arrival. Because this is not the end of something. This is the beginning of something. The gate is behind you. The new landscape is ahead of you. And the version of you that is standing in it right now, the crystalline version, the coherent version, the version that your code was always written for, is not a future self you are working toward. It is the self you are, right now, in this moment, on this side of the threshold. Everything that has led you here, every moment of confusion, every experience of the old reality thinning, every flash of knowing, every inexplicable pull toward something you could not name, every night of lying awake feeling the electric silence of a universe holding its breath. All of it was the approach to the gate. All of it was the crystalline code responding to the rising frequency, preparing the system for activation, moving you toward the threshold that was always waiting for you. You are here. The gate is behind you. The crystal has formed. And from this point forward, you navigate as what you actually are, a coherent, crystalline node in the quantum field of collective consciousness. A being whose perception has expanded beyond the limits of the 3D map. A consciousness that can feel the connections, perceive the patterns, access the temporal field, and broadcast a signal into the quantum field that is clear, precise, unified, and powerful. This is what you are. This is what you have always been. This is what your crystalline code was always written for. The question was never whether the gate existed. The question was whether you would step through when it opened. You stepped through. And on this side, the frequency is different. The air is different. The quality of reality is different. Not because the world has changed, because the instrument of perception has changed, because the filter has thinned, because the crystalline code that was always in your architecture has finally, fully, irreversibly activated. Welcome to 5D. Not as a destination, as a state, as a configuration of consciousness, as the coherent, crystalline, fully activated expression of the being you have always been, finally visible to itself, finally operating at its full bandwidth, finally broadcasting the signal. It was always meant to broadcast. The gate is open. You have crossed. There is no going back, and you would not want to. If there is a moment of stillness available to you, tonight, or in the quiet before the day begins, return to this transmission then. Let the crossing practice land again from the other side of having already heard it. And if someone comes to mind as you sit in that stillness, someone you can feel is close to their own gate, send this to them, not as a recommendation, as a bridge. When you share a threshold transmission with someone who is standing at their own edge, you are not just pointing them toward a video. You are extending your coherent field into theirs. Two crystalline nodes in resonance activate each other faster than either activates alone. The bridge you build for someone else is also the bridge that deepens your own crossing. Take a breath. Let it land. Let the crossing settle into your cells, into your bioelectric field, into the quantum field of your body. Let the crystalline state stabilize. Let the new configuration become your new baseline, your new normal, your new ground. And then, when you are ready, when the integration has had its moment, take the next step. Not because you have to, because you can, because you are finally on the terrain that your code was always written for, because the landscape ahead of you is vast and luminous and full of thresholds you have not yet imagined, gates you have not yet seen, crossings that will take you to configurations of consciousness that are as far beyond where you are now as where you are now is beyond where you were when you first pressed play. The path goes on. The frequency keeps rising. The crystalline code keeps activating. And you, the crystalline being standing on the other side of this threshold, in the clear air of the 5D field, with the gate behind you and the vast, luminous landscape ahead. You are ready for all of it. You have always been ready. You just needed to cross the gate to know it. The gate is open. You are through. Go.